Hi, I'm Dean Jones. This is Chasing Green Arrows. Now, we've all drawn up our first drafts, but we know that sticking with that team is not really realistic. We'll study the pre-season form and there'll be injuries, and we'll have second thoughts as well over who's actually doing well, who's going to bang in the early weeks of the season. But there are also transfers to consider in the coming weeks that are going to impact on our teams that we actually want to pick for game week 1. So I want to look at the sorts of players that are going to be coming into the Premier League or making moves within the Premier League that are going to affect and influence how we select our sides for game week 1. So I've outlined 10 transfers that could impact our FPL sides for the new season. So let's get stuck straight in, because this first deal is not complete as I record this, but it seems imminent. And that is Riccardo Calafiori, who is on his way to Arsenal. Now, Arsenal only conceded 29 goals last season, and this guy is going to make them even more mean. He used to be a fullback, but he changed to centre-back. At Arsenal, he could snap up that unclaimed position at left-back, which would be really interesting, and he might even come in at a good price. If we consider that the likes of Saliba and Gabriel are in there at 6 million, well, I think there's reason to believe that Calafiori might be 5.5 or 5. And if that's the case when this game updates him, and once he joins Arsenal, we're going to have to consider him very carefully. Now, there's no central defender in Europe's top 5 leagues that managed more assists than Calafiori last season. So there's a first reason you need him in your side. When you think about the key attributes too that Mikel Arteta wants from his team, so you're thinking possession, you're thinking build-up play, good from set pieces, Calafiori fits the bill. Arteta's style is well defined, but Calafiori, from anyone you read that's talked about this guy, seen this guy, he seems a good fit for the Arteta model. Now, additionally, he's good at heading, and that's going to be important from set pieces. He will be dangerous from those. This could be a huge upside when it comes to looking at Arsenal assets, and we're all going to want at least one from game week 1. He can step into midfield too, so when you're thinking of a modern inverted fullback that plays in the midfield, Calafiori could well be your guy. So if and when this deal is confirmed, have Calafiori on your radar. Let's move on to the second pick, and that is Aaron Wan-Bissaka. Now, he's only £4.5 million at the moment, but because he's at Man United, there's very little interest in having him right now. The reason is that we don't expect him to actually play. The transfer market could change that when it comes to Wan-Bissaka. There has been interest in him from abroad, but West Ham are also linked to Wan-Bissaka, and that interest has been genuine. So if Wan-Bissaka does end up as a West Ham player, this could open him up to a new world of owners in FPL. Many would have forgotten just how good and consistent Wan-Bissaka can actually be. But if you cast your minds back to his final season at Crystal Palace or his first couple of seasons at Man United, he was getting up like 35 games a season. This is somebody that you can really trust to not only be in that team, but also be quite a threat going forward. So, yeah, Wan-Bissaka is somebody to look out for, and a team like West Ham could give him new life. If this opens up, have him on your shortlist. Additionally, if you want another fullback to look out for, the Nusa Mazraoui is arriving in the Premier League from Bayern. There's a good chance that that happens. A few teams looking at Mazraoui at the moment. He's another good fullback option if he comes into the game, so keep an eye on that one. Now, the third talking point, the third player to profile is Manuel Ugarte. Now, Man United fans already have eyes on this guy, but FPL owners should pay attention too. To be honest, this is not a player I would necessarily see as an FPL addition himself. He's a defensive midfielder, probably won't tick too many boxes in terms of what we all look for, even if he's cheap. But what he would do is raise the chances of assets around him having a good season. And that's what we want to see from Man United players. We've seen Lenny Rowe come into Man United. He brings new security to United's backline. And if this guy is in front of him protecting the backline, then have more faith in Man United keeping clean sheets. Players like Lisandro Martinez, players like Euro should suddenly start to look like unmissable assets. So look out for Ugarte. Man United have been looking into this deal. They've tried finding out how much money would be needed up front, how the possibility of a loan could be, if that could open up. And even if it's not Ugarte, then Man United clearly are in the market for a defensive midfielder. And whoever that will be really will define how much we can trust Man United assets going forward next season, particularly in that defence. Now, we addressed an Arsenal incoming transfer earlier, but there are also outgoings to keep an eye on. The next player that I've got on my list here is Reiss Nelson. Now, his future at Arsenal is in the balance, and right now, £5 million to have Reiss Nelson in your FPL midfield is really unthinkable. That's why he's owned by pretty much no one. But let's give him some respect. There is a lot of talk around him making a transfer, and I think in a different team, Reiss Nelson could be a completely different type of asset for us to consider. If he has a new role, if he has more importance in another side, once we start to see what is outlined for him, I think we can start to judge Reiss Nelson differently. He's going to be guaranteed more game time. And he's also likely, if he makes a move, to be guaranteed a more important role in the side than he's ever got at Arsenal. The likes of West Ham, Fulham and Crystal Palace are all looking at this guy, all seriously thinking how he could make an impact on their team. So if he gets a raise in the status, makes a banging start to the new season, I think Reiss Nelson will start to look very good value for money. The next player is Emile Smith-Rowe, and this is another Arsenal player to keep an eye on. So, look, the value is not there right now. Like Reiss Nelson, you don't really want to pick Emile Smith-Rowe because you don't think he's going to get many minutes, and that's totally fair enough. But this is a very good footballer, and he could become very good value if he makes the right career choice this summer. Fulham and Crystal Palace are vying to sign him, and this is a player that really does have very good credentials within the league. He's very worthy of a Premier League starting role week in, week out. Now, £5.5 million is drawing no one in right now, and that's fair enough. That's actually the right choice. You shouldn't be picking Emile Smith-Rowe right now. He's not a good asset, but he will become a good asset if he makes a good move. If he gets a chance to shine every week, then look, I support Fulham. I'll be honest. I'm all over this one. I want Emile Smith-Rowe to join Fulham, and if he does, I'll be interested in buying him. He's up there with Andreas Pereira as someone that really could create chances. Let's look at Aston Villa now, because they've been one of the busiest clubs in the window so far. And Jhon Duran is somebody that has been talked about a lot. There's been a lot of fuss here about a guy that many outside of Aston Villa won't really understand, because barely anyone outside of Aston Villa has probably seen him play. The scouting reports are pretty good on him. And if Chelsea and West Ham have been this hot on him, there must be a reason for that. So far, he's been priced out of a transfer, but there is a feeling within the game that Villa might yet negotiate on his price. And if he lands at another team, then this might well be a very good third option for us to consider in our attack. Now, at the moment, that's not really the case, because you imagine that Duran is just going to be getting sub appearances and Ollie Watkins is going to be that main man. And even with Moussa Diaby leaving, you feel that Aston Villa will be signing somebody else. But as a leading man at a club, say like West Ham, it could be somewhat tempting to go and sign Duran and give him a chance. Now, Crystal Palace fans have had a bit of a stressful time. They've already lost Michael Elise, and they've got a couple of other players that seem to be up for grabs. So let's have a look at a couple of Crystal Palace players that could be on the move and how they could influence our thinking when it comes to FPL in the coming weeks. And the first one is Marc Guehi, who comes in at £4.5 million. Now, even as part of the Crystal Palace team next season, I'll be honest, I think it's a pretty good value pick. I know there are loads of 4.5 million assets out there at the moment, and they all seem pretty reasonable, but Guehi is one of the best defenders in this league. The thing is, he's caught the eye of many clubs across the Premier League, and some of them, let's be honest, are better than Crystal Palace. Man United and Arsenal's interest has waned, but Tottenham, Liverpool, Chelsea all seem to be still on the radar. And obviously, Guehi put in some very good performances for England at Euro 2024, which means that he is still worth the sort of money that Crystal Palace are looking for. He's not going to come cheap in real life, but when you consider in the game that he's such a cheap asset, other England defenders like John Stones and Kyle Walker are rated at like 1 million higher in the game than him. Kieran Trippier's rated higher than him too. I know that he doesn't have the same assets going forward as the likes of Trippier and Walker, but still, I think that he could be considered a very strong asset that is going to make any defence more resilient. If he joins a side that brings even more chance of clean sheets, I think there should be a sudden pile-on to sign Marc Guehi ahead of the new season. The other player at Crystal Palace that we have to talk about is Eberechi Eze, already one of the most owned players in the game, but that's for good reason. His 7 million price tag is good value. And that's going to change depending on which club he was to end up joining. Now, there will be a temptation that if he joins Tottenham, for example, you're like, yes, this is even better value. But I do think that this one is something to consider quite carefully. First and foremost, Spurs are fond of Eze, right? He's cheaper than James Maddison, for example. by 0.5 million. So FPL owners should be considering him as well. He scored more points than James Maddison as well last season. His style of play makes him exactly the sort of player that we want in our team when it comes to FPL. And his price in the game is tempting, even while at Palace, as I say. The thing that we're going to have to consider if he joins a team like Tottenham is, does he become a better asset or a worse asset? Because at Crystal Palace, he's the main guy. Like next season, no Elise, Eze is the guy that you're looking for, and he is going to be looking to pull up trees and make the difference. If he goes to Tottenham, then obviously he's going to have a lot of pressure because there's going to be a big price tag attached to him. But how long will it take him to settle? If he moves up a level and is seen as getting decent game time, I still think he could become a good asset. I think that Eze is every bit as good as some of the players that are currently in this game at 8.5 million, to be honest with you. The last couple of players on this list are a bit speculative, but I thought I'd throw them in there for a bit of fun. And the first one is Jonathan David. Now, look, he's a player that has been talked about for a long time in terms of coming to the Premier League. We might see it. We might yet see it. He's available to leave Lille, and Spurs are one of the teams that have got an eye on him. We know they would like a new centre forward. We would ideally like to see someone other than Richarlison in this Spurs attack, so that outside of Son, we have a Tottenham asset to actually aim for and trust them to score some goals. Now, at the moment, teams like Roma are also in this conversation. So it is a bit of a stretch to be imagining Jonathan David in the Premier League at the moment, but he's definitely been offered to Premier League clubs. He has good goal scoring record. And if he moved to somewhere like Spurs or even Chelsea or someone like that, which has been mooted, I think he'd hold really good value, because I don't think he would be that expensive if he came into the game. It'd be likely that he comes into the game, I think, at £6 or £7 million. We're always on the lookout for a good value third striker. So if Jonathan David does make a Premier League move, I think we should be considering him. Likewise, Viktor Gyokeres. Now, this one really would be a surprise because his current club Sporting just don't want to lose him. He's got a big release clause, but there are whispers that he might end up leaving for less than that release clause. Now, if that does become doable, if he becomes attainable, then some of the biggest clubs in the Premier League are going to be trying to sign him. Spurs definitely have interest in this guy. Now, the only time we've seen Gyokeres in England was in the Championship. He is definitely in a place right now where he could be trusted to deliver on the big stage. It would be unlikely he'd have a big price tag in this game as well. I think, again, we'd be looking at about £7 million for Gyokeres. And yeah, just a cheeky final one to look at really on Gyokeres, because I think he's a great player. I think he'd be a really nice one for FPL owners to consider. So that's my wrap of FPL transfers to look out for in the build-up to the new season. If you've enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. And we'd love you to join us on Chasing Green Arrows every Monday and every Friday.